And now to our second candidate, Maria Fernanda Espinosa. She has served twice. Women always want to do it twice. They do it so well that people ask them to do it again. Twice as Ecuador's foreign minister. She was the Minister of Defense as well. In 2018, she was elected president of the 73rd session of the UN General Assembly. She's the first woman from Latin America to have that job, and only the fourth woman in the history of the entire Assembly. Maria Fernanda Espinosa is nominated by Antigua and Barbuda. Please join me in welcoming Maria Fernanda Espinosa. Maria, thank you very much. You don't mind. Well, obviously she's got good fashion sense. Maria Fernanda Espinosa, you have 5 minutes to settle your vision. Why do you want this toughest of jobs, and what are you going to do with it? And I will give you a warning at 4 minutes.
Thank you, Lyse. Excellencies and friends, it is a true pleasure to be back in London. I was here already in January at the invitation of UN UK, and what I did is I spoke about a world in crisis. Conflicts, famine, climate shocks, waning of global cooperation, the UN under strain. And I wish I could say things have improved, and we know they haven't. That is why I want to speak plainly this evening. Nobody wants another careful speech. What we need is action. And I want to focus on 4 things this evening. First, I want to talk about prevention. The UN was created to prevent war, a solemn promise made when bombs were still raining down in this city. But too often, the UN arrives after the worst has happened. What we need is bold ideas. As Secretary General, I will establish a prevention and early action hub, and its purpose is very simple: to ensure that warnings reach decision makers early and that action can be taken before the situation gets worse. The Secretary General must always be ready to lead peace efforts. She must focus on addressing the consequences of a crisis, whether that's diplomacy to secure life-saving support or working together to manage energy shocks or food shortages. And the Secretary General must recognize when the UN needs to be center stage, but also when it's better placed to play a supporting role. Second, we must put people at the heart of development, not the UN. With support from countries like the UK, the UN has saved and transformed millions of lives. We must not forget that. The Sustainable Development Goals remain the right ambition, but ambition is not action. Countries do not need another summit or another slogan. They need the money, the technology, and the institutions to deliver for their people. Development cannot be delivered from New York. I strongly believe that. We need a leaner UN that can focus on where it adds most value, a local-first approach that empowers people and governments. Third, we need to work together to harness and manage the power of AI. This is not a tech issue. It is a security issue. It is a jobs issue. It is a rights issue. No single state or company should call the shots. The UN cannot and should not regulate everything, but it must bring people together, including civil society and young people, those that are normally shut out of these conversations. And finally, we have to change the UN for the better, not the cheaper. Yes, we have to cut costs. That is essential. But that cannot be our only goal. Reform must mean doing better. That means focusing on demand, not supply. That means being prepared to let go of some functions entirely and focus on the organization's greatest strengths. Ultimately, you, in this room and outside, will not judge the UN by the number of reform initiatives, no, by whether it has improved your lives and your future. That is the UN I want to build. With governments, with a strong leadership team, and with you, of course. I do not pretend to have all the answers, but this is not a task for one individual. The United Nations is a promise we must all keep. So here's what I offer. A life devoted to serving my country and the international community, an insider-outsider perspective as someone who understands the system but is not captured by it, a track record of working across all the pillars of the UN and with people from all walks of life, a firm commitment without fear or favor to the values of the Charter, to international law, and to serving all member states and the world's 8 billion people. This summer, I suspect many of you will be hoping that England's men's team will lift the World Cup after 60 long years of waiting. Well, it has been 80 years of waiting for a woman to lead the UN. Okay. So this is our opportunity.
5 minutes.
This is our opportunity to show the UN can walk the talk on equality and results. This is the United Nations I'm prepared to build. Not a perfect institution, but a serious, compassionate one. Not a louder UN, but a more relevant one that delivers where it matters most. I thank you.
Thank you. So you've talked about the wars, you've talked about the moments where the UN has to be center stage, you've mentioned that no one power should call the shots. Why? What talents, skills, experience do you have that make you the person to accomplish that? You were, after all, the president of the General Assembly during President Trump's first term, where the issues of resources and relevance were really accentuated. What did you learn then?
Well, I think I have the experience to navigate in turbulent waters. I think the UN has never been Disneyland. I think that what is important is to see a Secretary General that is impartial, that is able to build bridges, to work with everybody. I have shown that when I was president of the General Assembly. I think we need a Secretary General that is a 360 Secretary General, that knows every pillar of the UN, that is not a person that is not a single issue person, but more like a Renaissance leader. No? You also need, what I just said, Lyse, you need an insider-outsider, knowing how the UN works, its potential, its challenges, but have, been able to not be captured by the UN. I have never worked for the UN, but served the UN in many ways, through the UN, for about 25 years.
Yes. I think Antonio Guterres would have also called himself an insider-outsider, and yet here it is, he's not with the UN at the center stage. In one word, what quality do you have that can make a difference?
Poet.
Poet?
Yes. I'm a poet. I strongly believe in the power of words. I strongly believe in the power of narratives.
So communication skills.
And communication, but also being faithful to what you say.
Okay.
And I think that's absolutely important. As a poet, I learn, first of all, to observe, to deep listen, and to act, and act firmly.
Okay.
And I also, of course, learn about beauty and about creativity and innovation.
We're going to give you some questions from the audience, but first we need to hear some commitments from you. The 148 billion campaign, of which the UN, the UK Association of the UN is a member, has called on all candidates to commit publicly during this campaign to 5 principles. And everyone here will remember what you said, so please think carefully. Publishing financial disclosures, engaging with civil society, participating in transparent General Assembly and Security Council processes, respecting Article 100 of the UN Charter. As you know, that means independence from member states, and avoiding conflicts of interest with any current UN role. Are these principles important, and if so, why?
I think that they're vital. When I think about integrity, I don't think that integrity should be proclaimed. It should be earned through consistent behavior, and I can show that throughout my 25 years of career and public life. The second very important issue is I would sign the 5 principles that I read carefully right away, just now.
We'll get that from you later.
Yeah, in Lyse, for example, when I was exploring the possibility of putting my name forward as Secretary General, I was the executive director of a very small NGO, not a UN agency, no. And before I started the consultations, I stepped down from my job, just in case there was perception of some conflict of interest. The issue of civil society, it's a little bit of who I am. In civil society's participation and engagement is not only about ticking the box, it is about understanding that the huge implementation gap of the United Nations is due to the lack of ownership, the lack of co-responsibility, and lack of space of civil society to do the advice, the advocacy, the translation of UN decision-making into the daily life of people. So the role of civil society is absolutely vital. Disclosing the financial, of course, and not at the beginning and at the end, but during the process as well, ready to do that, very happy to do that, of course.
Okay, that will make many people here very happy. Your first question from the audience. David Cheeseman, who's from the UNA UK, he's a member, convenes a working group on accountability and the UN Security Council veto. His question, as Secretary General, what would you do to stop vetoes in the Security Council, blocking credible action, especially when it comes to addressing, I'd like to add the word preventing, mass atrocities? The veto. What would you do to stop them?
The veto power...
I'm assuming you would want to stop them.
What I'm saying is that the veto power is written in the Charter. It's a principle that is in the Charter. And I think we have to be very frank and honest. What is the space of movement of the Secretary General? The Secretary General should provide good offices, create the platforms for member states, especially the P5 and the members of the Security Council, to come together, to discuss issues, to respond quickly. That's where my early action hub makes sense, because the role of the UN is to prevent wars and protect people.
You don't think there should be a veto when it comes to the worst abuses, the worst violations?
I can have my personal views on this, but I think what we're talking here is what is the role of the Secretary General. And the role of the Secretary General is a quiet diplomacy, back channels, to have a permanent and constant interaction and communication with the members of the Security Council, including the P5. Here, my personal opinion doesn't count. I will be the chief administrative officer of the UN, the lead diplomat, the lead advocate, but I cannot reinterpret the Charter, unfortunately.
So, just to be absolutely clear, just a very short answer, you would do nothing to stop vetoes from being used?
I can use my good offices in talking to the members of the Security Council, especially to the Permanent Five, of course. It doesn't need to be public. It doesn't need to make headlines. That's part of the job of the Secretary General.
We have a question from the audience. Kimran Ryan from the Advocacy Academy. No? Yes? Oh, good. Oh.
We can
Go ahead.
see from here, unfortunately.
So young people from our movement have reported feeling hopelessness around the future they are inheriting, facing an economic system and state institutions that do not value them. How would the United Nations create a more hopeful future for young people? What would a youth-centered economic system look like, and why is it not being delivered?
More hopeful future for young people, give them a role in decision making.
Well, now it's in fashion to say, young people are important, youth are important. In the process of negotiating the Pact of the Future, we came out with a declaration for future generations. And the truth is that young people are not the future, they are the present. They have to be part of the conversation, part of the decision making. If you look at the team that is working with me right now, most of them are under 30, and I listen to them because they are the most creative. They are the smartest, the well-informed.
But what would you do to include them?
Well, first of all, we have the Declaration on Future Generations, a new, and I applaud that, a new office for young people. But basically, I would recruit as part of my senior team young people. I'm working with them right now, and I will ensure that decision-making in the House brings in the advice, the voice, and the space for young people to be part of a new multilateralism of the 21st century. Not to tick the box, but to make them part of the decision-making in the House, respecting, of course, the intergovernmental nature of the United Nations. But they are the agents of today, not of tomorrow.
Kimran, apply for the job if she gets the job. Okay, another question from the floor. Andrew Gilmore, who's a trustee of the United Nations Association of the United Kingdom, and he's a former Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights. Andrew, the floor is yours. 10,000 steps for you tonight, sir.
Thank you so much. Good evening. As part of the warm-up this evening, before you came on, we were shown an opinion poll that reflected that of all the many areas of activity of the UN, the UN's performance in human rights is the lowest. The last Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, about 12 years ago, launched a major initiative called the Human Rights Upfront Initiative. Many consider it the most important initiative ever in the history of the UN in human rights. Rather sadly, it's been allowed to expire slowly, and I was wondering if you would consider reinitiating it.
This was in 2013, that Ban Ki-moon. Yeah.
First of all, I think all good initiatives from the past and the current administration, I'm not a leader of slash and burn. All the good examples, all the good initiatives in the 3 pillars of the UN, of course, I will embrace them. If they became out of date, I will look at them, of course. But coming back to the human rights issue, this is part of the 3 pillars of the UN. Human rights is part of the job description of the UN. Everything we do, everything the organization does has to really look at human dignity. Human dignity has to be at the center of everything we do in development, everything we do in peace and security. And believe me.
Would you do like Ban Ki-moon and do a very specific process of reform to put human rights at the center of everything the UN does? He launched a specific initiative?
Well, right now, I would say every action that the UN does has to embed human dignity and human rights. I don't know if there is, the right environment to have a dedicated initiative. What I can say, however, is the overall budget of the UN depends on how you count. From 1 to 3% of the entire budget of the UN is dedicated to human rights. And this tells you something. We need to do more and better, even in a context of austerity that we're living today. Every good idea is, of course, of use, especially if it has to do with strengthening the human rights pillar of the organization.
A question now from Anurad Janagram, who's from the Sintime London Clean Energy Roundtable. It's an emerging technology and innovation platform. In a world facing escalating climate, energy, and geopolitical crises, how would you strengthen collaboration between governments, industry, youth, civil society to accelerate implementation rather than only negotiations and commitments? In other words, just talking shops.
The issue of building networks and partnerships is absolutely vital in the world of today. When we speak about climate change, we understood a long time ago that climate change is not anymore an environmental issue. We understood that climate shocks can trigger conflict, can alter entire macroeconomics of a country, are connected to health, are connected to everything we do. So any response to the climate emergency has to factor in this complexity.
But how
and
practical,
how can you factor in the
implementation?
complexity is to bring all the actors together. You said something very important, Lyse. If you ask a person coming from Mars or Jupiter that we have met 31 times soon now in Turkey on Conference of the Parties to discuss and negotiate climate agreements, and after 31 years, emissions continue to grow. There is a huge implementation gap that we have to deal with. And one of the answers to that is the complexity, address climate change from a peace and security perspective, from a conflict perspective, from a health perspective, from a development perspective. It is the defining challenge of our times. It requires, complexity requires complex responses. Well-organized responses, I have to say, within the UN, I would say there is a need for greater coherence, less duplication, and better working together within the system. I have seen it from the outside, and I think it needs a major restructuring. The UN delivering as one on climate, supporting member states to respond to the climate challenges of today.
Okay.
And just to say one more sentence, I am here representing a small island developing state. I know closely what a climate shock can do. It can devastate and erase the entire infrastructure of a country. It is the defining challenge of our time.
We're running out of time. I have one last question, and it is from Ian Bell from North East Hertfordshire of the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, the governing Labour Party. His question, given we are on course to fall short of the UN sustainability goals by 2030, do you think they have to be rethought to fit into today's ever-increasing world of isolationism, tariffs, and aid cuts? And if they are going to be rethought, how?
Well, I think the Sustainable Development Goals are the right ambition. I said that. It's a reference, an aspirational agenda. And I think it's very important. It's one of the big successes of multilateralism. And what I would do before we get to 2030 is put in motion the acceleration plans for implementation, of course. But I think that the UN cannot be an implementer of development projects on the ground. I said development has to be owned by countries, because developing countries, and I come from one, we need three things. And that's what I would work on: the money, mobilize resources, the technologies, and the capacity, strong institutions. But the development cannot be delivered from New York. It has to be delivered under the rule of local first, the subsidiarity principle.
Okay. Last question, but it's very short answer because we are over time, but in interest of fairness, it's one of the toughest jobs in the world, but the citizens don't want you falling asleep at your desk or going mad. Very briefly, how will you relax?
Well, I will go to the first botanical garden next to me, if it's all buildings, but because I think that nature gives you the energy. But I will also listen to elders, and the elders that I grew up with. especially the ones I spent 5 years with in the Ecuadorian Amazon. That was my school, my university, where I learned solidarity and resilience the most. I will call one of them. They do have cell phones these days. At the time where I was living at the Amazon, they didn't.
Yes.
So I will listen to the voices of wisdom and connect to nature.
Do some tree bathing. Maria Fernanda Espinosa, thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.